He waited 10 years for his ex, and when she returned, he picked her over me. Now I'm thriving without him. My heart was absolutely shattered when the man I loved chose his ex. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly know, was that his ex held a secret that would unravel everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal before Oliver and I ever became us. There was always that person in his life. Sophie, my best friend. They were the kind of couple that made you roll your eyes at their sickening sweetness, but you couldn't help but adore them. I was genuinely thrilled when they got engaged. Felt like a fairy tale. Then on their wedding day, Sophie just vanished. No call, no text, no explanation. Just gone. Oliver was utterly devastated. A hollow shell of himself. I stayed by his side that entire first month, convinced he was going to do something stupid. Gradually, something shifted between us. 10 months after Sophie disappeared, we started dating. And for 4 beautiful years, we built a life together. Then 3 nights ago, she came back. I had no idea Sophie was even in town, but Oliver was a mess all day. Distracted. Absent. Completely checked out. He forgot about our plans. He checked his phone constantly during dinner. He'd lose focus mid-sentence, and a cold dread started to settle in my stomach. Finally, I had to ask, "Is everything okay?" He snapped out of his bizarre trance, his eyes wide, and flashed me a fake smile. "I'm fine," he lied flatly. "Is it because Sophie's back in town?" I pushed, my voice barely a whisper. He looked away. "I mean, my mom mentioned it, but I don't want to talk about her." His words stung. He'd never spoken to me like that. My heart clenched. Fighting back tears, I asked, "Oliver, do you still love me?" His expression softened then. He pulled me into a hug, whispering that he did. But I knew deep down he was just lying to himself. The next night I realized how true that feeling was. We were supposed to be celebrating our 4-year anniversary. I arrived at our customary restaurant early, found our usual table, ordered his favorite wine, and carefully placed his present on the table. And then I waited. For 2 hours I sat there, checking my phone every 3 minutes, a knot of panic tightening in my chest, terrified something had happened to him. After 4 agonizing hours, a text finally came through. 8 words. "Can't attend. Something happened. The end." No call. Just that. But I knew exactly where he was. I drove straight to the park where the 3 of us used to hang out in college, near the lake where we'd talk until dawn. And there they were, sitting on our bench. Oliver was gazing at her. His face a picture of patience and adoration. A look he'd never once given me in our 4 years together. I approached silently, hiding behind the trees, listening. Oliver was sobbing. "I can't believe you're really here," Sophie murmured, her hand gently resting on his. "I'm so sorry for everything." It was all moving so fast between us back then. I kept telling myself I was ready for marriage when I wasn't. So I ran. But all these years, Oliver, there was no one else on my mind but you. She softly pressed his palm to her lips. Oliver nodded, dropping his eyes. "It just kind of happened," he whispered. "Just happened." His words made my chest constrict so tightly it hurt. "We used to call everything an accident." "Do you love her?" Sophie asked frankly, forcing his gaze to meet hers. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. "Honestly, I don't know. I thought I did, but seeing you again, I'm not sure anymore." She paused, her voice soft but direct. "Is there still a chance for us?" My blood ran cold. 4 years, and he'd still say yes if she asked. By the way, if you're still with me and this story has you hooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the wild twists and turns coming up. That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the woods. I walked straight up to them, pulled off the promise ring he'd given me just last Christmas when he'd talked about our happy ending, and dropped it into his outstretched hand. "Wait," he shouted, but I kept walking. Naively, I hoped he'd follow, that he'd stop me. His refusal told me everything I needed to know. He never came home that night, or the next, or the night after. I packed his belongings into boxes, left them by the door, changed the locks, deleted his number, and did everything he never had the guts to do when Sophie left him years ago. 6 days later. He knocked. Through the peephole I saw him. He looked tired. He was still clutching that ring. He banged again. "Can we talk?" he pleaded through the door. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please can I come in? Just to talk." My hand hovered on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to open it. Something deep inside me, a foolish, lingering love, yearned to hear his words. Just before I could decide, my phone buzzed. Text from Sophie. "Please hear him out. There's something you have to know. Something we never told you." I unlocked the door, opening it just enough to see him bathed in the hallway light. Oliver looked bad. His hair was a mess, like he hadn't combed it in days. His eyes were red and swollen. The collar of his wrinkled shirt was stained. He couldn't let go of the promise ring, despite the scorching sensation it must have brought. I checked my phone again, rereading Sophie's message. The words still made no sense. 5 seconds passed. Oliver started to speak, but I stopped him. "Sophie contacted me," I said, my voice flat. "She suggested I learn something you never told me." His face went white. Not pale, not weary, but white as if all the blood had drained from his skull. He stumbled back, his shoulder meeting the hallway wall, leaning on it as if his legs might collapse. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. He shut his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them again, he looked at me, defeated. "We need to sit down," he whispered. "Because it's complicated, and I should have told you years ago." I stepped away from the doorway silently. He hesitated, stepping in, probably doubting I'd let him stay. Out of habit, I shut the door behind him. We walked into the living room. I sat on the window chair, far from the couch, far from him. Oliver sat at the very end of the couch, still clutching the ring. The distance between us felt immense, stretching further than the actual space. His hands shook as he waited to speak. The stillness in the room was so profound, I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. Finally, Oliver spoke, his voice gruff and thick with unshed tears. He denied Sophie had left their wedding day due to cold feet or commitment anxiety. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sophie discovered her mother had early-onset Alzheimer's. Her father had suppressed its severity for months, hiding it from everyone. Oliver recounted the last dress fitting. Sophie's mother didn't recognize her. Sophie, showing her mom the finished gown, was treated like a stranger. Her mother had asked, "Who are you and why are you in my house?" Sophie's father pulled her aside, finally revealing her mother had been sick for a year, using excuses like sleepy or anxious. He'd felt humiliated, believed he could handle it alone. Oliver kept talking and I just sat there trying to make sense of it all. Sophie's father, Oliver explained, had implored her not to tell anyone. He wanted secrecy. He didn't want his wife treated differently. Sophie was scheduled to marry Oliver, move 4 states away for his new job, into the apartment they'd put a deposit on. But her mother was dying, crumbling before her eyes. Sophie couldn't leave. She had to stay. But she couldn't choose between her love and her dying mother. So she fled. She disappeared on her wedding day because she couldn't bring herself to say the words. She didn't know how to shatter Oliver's heart when hers was already breaking. Something shifted inside me as he spoke. My pure, burning rage began to turn into a profound uncertainty. My 4-year-old story, the one where Sophie was a selfish coward, was completely changed. This was different. This was an impossible, dreadful situation. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, my voice harsher than intended. "Why did you let me believe Sophie just heartlessly abandoned you?" He looked down at his hands, the promise ring glinting. He discovered the truth 7 months ago. 7 months. That was half of our relationship. Sophie had eventually contacted Oliver after her father suffered a stroke, to apologize and explain why she'd fled. Oliver had carried this secret ever since. Knowing Sophie didn't leave because she stopped loving him. Knowing she fled because she was drowning in an awful circumstance and couldn't beg for help. I saw it in his eyes as he spoke. This knowledge had weighed on him daily. He knew the truth about her, and he was with me every day. He claimed he hadn't told me because he thought it didn't matter. Sophie was gone, and they were building something genuine. He believed he could hide the facts without consequence. But I saw then that it influenced everything. His occasional zoning out. The way he'd grow silent when others mentioned weddings or sick parents. He was never truly there, not even in our happiest moments. "Have you spoken to Sophie in the past 7 months?" I asked, my voice low and steady. The question hung in the air between us. Oliver paused. A few seconds felt like an eternity. He confessed they'd exchanged a few emails. About her mom's illness. Her dad's recuperation. Checking in. Nothing sexual or indecent. But those emails made me sick. He'd been emotionally engaged with her all along. Thinking about her, worrying about her, all while promising me a future, giving me a promise ring, talking about our happy ending. Oliver's speech quickened, a reaction to the look on my face. He insisted the emails were benign. He never intended to act on those emotions. He thought he had everything under control. Sophie had only returned to town to help her father sell the house. He couldn't manage it alone after the stroke. She returned to manage the estate, and then she was here. Not just words on a screen. Her physical presence demolished all of Oliver's carefully constructed barriers. Every way he'd told himself he was over her. He'd been a mess trying to reconcile his feelings with his expectations, wondering if what we had was real, or if he was simply using me as a safe place to bury his unresolved feelings. As he spoke, I understood. He had lied to us both, and probably to himself. I couldn't sit anymore. I stood up. "You have to leave," I said. He looked desperate and guilty. "I need time to think." Oliver argued. He suggested we talk more, work through this. But I was firm. "The boxes I packed are by the door. Take what you need and leave." He sat for another minute, deciding whether to push back. Eventually he stood and walked out. He took his keys off the rack and opened a box of clothes. "I'll spend a few days with Max," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Give you room. Then we can talk." I didn't respond. He gathered his things and left as I watched. The door closed behind him. I turned the lock and stood in the quiet apartment. The kitchen clock ticked on. The fridge hummed. Streetcars passed outside. I returned to the living room and sat on Oliver's couch. The pillow was still warm from him. I glanced around our shared apartment and realized I didn't know who I was mad at. Sophie for leaving. Oliver for lying. Myself for not recognizing it sooner. Or all of us for creating this tangled mess. For probably an hour I stared at nothing. His absence made the apartment uncomfortably quiet. Scrolling through old images on my phone made my chest hurt even more. At 11:30 I knew I wouldn't sleep, so I called Emily. She answered on the second ring, half asleep, but woke quickly when she heard my voice. "Tonight," I began and told her everything. Oliver's emails with Sophie. The lies. How he'd said he didn't know what he felt. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was silent. My stomach dropped. Then she spoke. "You know," she said softly, "you may have loved saving Oliver more than loving him." I wanted to fight her to defend myself, but I choked on the words because I knew she was right. I had wasted 4 years trying to please someone who was never truly there. Emily talked to me until almost 2 a.m., leaving me exhausted but clearer. The next morning I was fatigued, my eyes swollen from crying. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. I knew what to do. I opened my messages and texted Sophie. I told her we needed to talk face to face without Oliver. Within 5 minutes, she agreed to meet me that afternoon at a downtown coffee shop. I paced the apartment all morning, practicing what to say. Practicing in the bathroom mirror felt like a presentation. But I knew seeing her would likely make me forget everything I'd prepared. Driving to the coffee shop at 1:30, I arrived 15 minutes early. I ordered an unwanted tea and sat by the window, watching people. Sophie didn't look like I expected. She seemed exhausted, older than the carefree college girl from Oliver's old social media. Dark bags beneath her eyes, a disheveled bun. She approached and I stood awkwardly, unsure if we should embrace or shake hands. She sat across from me, thanking me for meeting her. Before I could respond, she apologized for last night's SMS. She claimed she realized it was cruel to drop the bomb without warning after sending it. I nodded and told her why I wanted to chat. We ordered coffee, and she told me about the past 4 years. She described her mother's early-onset Alzheimer's, how she forgot everyone she loved. Sophie cried as she said her mom hadn't recognized her. She described quitting her job, her apartment, her entire life to care for her full-time at home. She said her mom had died 4 months ago, and it had shattered her. She'd given up everything to care for her, including Oliver and their life together. Sophie claimed she returned to town to give Oliver closure and an explanation for vanishing on their wedding day. But seeing him in the park the other night brought back all the old sensations and scared her. She'd told him she wanted to try again because it had felt right then. I listened, digesting, trying to decide how I felt. I concluded by asking her what she wanted from Oliver now. Sophie gazed at her coffee cup for a while. Then she admitted ignorance. She swore she'd always love him, but she knew she'd harmed him and broken his trust. She wasn't sure if she wanted to try again, or if she was just lonely, mourning and craving familiarity. Then Sophie said something that changed my mind. Oliver mentioned you in the park. She said he'd told her I was compassionate and gentle, and that I'd helped him heal after their breakup. Sophie stared at me. I could tell he cared about you, she said, her voice soft. But I could also tell he'd never let go of me. And that's not fair to you. After almost 3 hours, I realized Sophie wasn't the villain I wanted her to be. She'd made a tough choice and handled it poorly, and everyone was suffering for it. Near the conclusion, she said she was moving back to her mom's hometown to settle the estate and start fresh, without these memories. She wanted to leave here. After saying farewell at the coffee shop, I felt emotionally weary, yet lighter. I drove home and entered my apartment to find Oliver had texted me, asking to chat again. After staring at the message, I put my phone face down on the counter. I ignored it. I needed time to figure out what I wanted instead of just following others. Emily delivered Thai takeaway from my favorite restaurant around 6 o'clock that night. She arrived, set up the meal, and put on a cheesy action movie without asking a single question. We watched explosions and ate pad thai as I tried to forget my mess. For 3 days, I went to work and came home, ignoring Oliver's texts. Finally, on day 4, I agreed to meet him at the park where everything went wrong. I arrived to see him nervously seated on the bench. When he saw me, he jumped up and started to apologize, but I stopped him. I told him Sophie had told me everything about her mom and why she left. Then I asked him directly, "Do you still love her?" Oliver struggled to respond, his expression showing his internal battle. Finally he admitted, "I don't know my feelings. Seeing Sophie brought back all the pain and love from before, but being with you has been comfortable and safe." Comfortable hit me hard. I want more than comfort and safety, I told him, my voice firm. I deserve someone who knows they desire me, without hesitation. Oliver looked heartbroken but didn't dispute it. He knew I was correct. Oliver and I got up from the bench, unsure what to do. I suggested we take a true break. Not just a few days of him living with someone else, but time to find out what we wanted independently. He looked at me. Are we splitting up? Honestly, I don't know yet, I said, my voice clear despite my constricted chest. But I know I can't keep waiting around while you decide if I'm enough for you. Oliver stroked his hair and nodded gently. We agreed to let him stay with Max for 3 weeks, with no talking. No texts, calls, or intentional encounters. He wanted to hug me goodbye. I shook my head. If he touched me then, I knew I might change my mind about everything. I walked alone to my car, turning off the radio to drive home in silence, just processing what had transpired. The apartment was too quiet when I arrived, so I called Emily to come over. She arrived an hour later with champagne and ice cream without questioning. She stayed on the couch with me as I wept. The next week at work was terrible. I was upset, unable to focus for more than 5 minutes. I forgot half my slides and ruined a client presentation. Helen, a frank 50-year-old divorcee, noticed when I zoned out at a team meeting while someone was talking to me. She interrupted me making coffee in the break room after the meeting. She stood between me and the door. "What's wrong?" she asked bluntly. "You've been zombie-like for days." I tried to blame it on fatigue, but Helen crossed her arms. "I don't believe you." Her directness broke me down, and I told her everything. About Oliver and Sophie, the park, the separation. She listened without interrupting or criticizing, nodding sometimes as I told my complicated story. She was silent when I finished. Then she recounted her own first marriage, to a man still obsessed with his ex-wife. Helen claimed she spent 5 years preparing his favorite dishes, supporting his career, being patient while he worked through his issues. But she was competing with a ghost, a pristine recall of someone who was gone. She recognized that she was competing against a concept, not a person, and could never win. Helen looked me in the eye. "The kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away and let Oliver figure out his mess without you waiting in the wings like some backup option." I knew her words were real, and they stung. She squeezed my shoulder. "You deserve someone who picks you first," she said, "not someone who loses everyone else before appreciating what he has." I returned to my work, feeling raw but lighter, like someone had finally given me permission to put myself first. As the days slowly passed, I focused on work, trying to forget Oliver. I didn't know if he was thinking about me, Sophie, or everything. 3 weeks after we broke up, Max texted me, asking to grab coffee. I was surprised he was reaching out, since Max had been Oliver's college friend before I even met him, but I agreed to see him the next day at a cafe near my workplace. Max was already sitting at a corner table, looking uncomfortable when I arrived. He rose when he saw me, and we awkwardly debated hugging. After ordering coffee, Max just blurted it out. "Oliver's failing miserably. Not eating, not sleeping. He just stares at his phone for hours, unsure who to contact." Max said Oliver had been on his sofa for 3 weeks, and it was painful to watch him come apart. All I could do was nod, waiting for him to continue. Max was upset with Oliver, having seen him squander years in the past, never committing to anyone. He said Oliver was paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice and being alone. Therefore, he was never honest with himself. "You deserve better than being someone's backup plan," Max added, "even if Oliver doesn't consciously see it that way." It's like Helen told me, and I feel it in my chest. I asked Max if Oliver still loved Sophie. He sighed, covered his face before responding. He believed Oliver still loved Sophie, but he also believed Oliver had genuine feelings for me that became twisted with gratitude and the dread of being alone when she left. Max advised Oliver to choose what he wanted, not what felt secure or what he should desire. He apologized for being forthright, but believed there had to be honesty about this circumstance. After coffee, Max hugged me and told me to take care of myself, no matter what Oliver did. I drove home feeling tranquil, like everything was finally falling into place, even though nothing was settled. That night, Sophie's name appeared on my phone. My pulse raced. We hadn't talked since that coffee shop discussion weeks ago. When I answered, she seemed scared, speaking rapidly, terrified I'd hang up. In 3 days, she was leaving town. She'd work in her mom's hometown to escape the memories, heartache, and convoluted past. Sophie wanted to meet again before leaving, to tell me something significant about her last talk with Oliver. Despite not wanting to hear what she had to say, I met her the next morning. We chose another coffee shop across town, one without history. Sophie entered and sat across from me, looking fatigued yet resolute. She ordered tea and inhaled before commencing. Oliver had unexpectedly visited her dad's house 2 days ago. She said he informed her he'd been thinking about everything and understood he'd been unfair to us by hiding his sentiments. Sophie, he'd said. He never stopped loving her, but he's formed a meaningful relationship with me and is afraid of making the wrong choice and ruining someone. Sophie's eyes welled up as she talked, and I could tell she was struggling. She told Oliver she was leaving because she couldn't let him hurt someone like she had 4 years ago. Sophie stated that she wouldn't return to the city, and that he should make his decision based on our relationship, not compared to what they had or could have. Hearing this made me sad and relieved. Her departure brought relief, but I was unhappy it took so much grief. Sophie softly touched my hand across the table. She explicitly apologized for the meltdown and the text that sparked it. She claimed she now realized I cared about Oliver and supported him through his darkest time. Sophie wished that whatever occurred between Oliver and me didn't make me doubt my value or ability to love. I heard her voice crack and understood she meant every word. We rose to go after finishing our drinks. Sophie hugged me tightly, and we held on longer than necessary. As we separated, I knew I'd miss our companionship from a simpler time. I watched her walk to her car and drive away, knowing I'd probably never see her again. My body was fatigued from everything, so I stayed home from work for a few days, claiming to be sick. I lay on the couch, gazing at the walls and contemplating my connection with Oliver in a manner I'd never done before. I replayed events from the last 4 years and noticed patterns I'd missed. Sometimes he'd zone out when we were together, like his mind was elsewhere. How he never communicated his deepest sentiments about anything, simply job or movies. I planned our future and talked about what we wanted while he merely nodded and didn't contribute. I told myself he needed time to trust again since Sophie hurt him. But being alone in the flat, I thought it might be easier than trauma. Maybe he didn't want to be there for me in the manner I needed him. I opened my phone to text Oliver. I wrote that Sophie was leaving town forever and we needed one last chat about who we were and what we wanted. I sent it before overthinking. He said affirmatively, asking when and where. In less than a minute. I invited him to the flat tomorrow afternoon. I put my phone down after he said okay and felt strangely relaxed. To relieve my hands, I cleaned the flat the next day. When Oliver knocked, I opened the door and found him looking frightened and fatigued. He entered and surveyed the space like a newcomer. Once we were together, the apartment seemed different. Not like our house, more like a place where something happened. We were on opposite ends of the sofa, with a large expanse that felt bigger than actual distance. Oliver spoke first, stating he'd been thinking a lot for weeks. He admitted to treating me unfairly from the start. He claimed he started dating me before recovering from Sophie. He loved me, but he wasn't sure I deserved it. His voice cracked as he stated that last sentence, and I could see he was struggling to confess it. Hearing his honesty made my chest tighten, but I liked it. I told him I'd been thinking too, and I realized something crucial. I stated I should pick myself instead of waiting for him. I told him I deserved someone who knew me from the start and didn't need to lose someone else to appreciate us. I saw Oliver's eyes well up, but he nodded slowly because he knew I was right. After a moment of silence, we started discussing the practical matters we'd been avoiding. Over 4 years, we'd jumbled our apartment contract, shared furnishings, and other details. Oliver offered to leave and find a new apartment so I could stay. I was surprised he was so giving, but sorry we had to split our lives. We decided to spend a few days to finalize everything before contacting the landlord. That weekend, Emily drove up to assist me packing Oliver's last items. She provided garbage bags, packing tape, and her no-nonsense approach, which I desperately needed. We removed clothing and shoes from his closet, then took his amenities and electric razor from the counter. Emily said she was proud of me for leaving instead of settling for someone who just wanted me half-heartedly. I found Oliver's promise ring at the door when we were cleaning out a bedroom drawer. I lingered over it in the light. I refused to keep it when Emily asked and put it in the box with his other items. My desire for that ring made me believe in a future that was never true. The following Monday, I contacted my insurance company's therapist hotline to make a same-week appointment. I completed the mental health history form in a modest downtown office waiting area. The therapist called me back, and I sat on her sofa, explaining everything about Oliver and Sophie, and how I'd lost a relationship and a friendship in one tangled mess. She listened without interrupting and then asked questions that changed my perspective. She showed me, during the following several sessions, that I was attempting to win Oliver's love by being flawless and helpful, whereas true love doesn't take ongoing proving. She stated I'd changed myself to fit his needs instead of being myself and seeing whether that was enough. Though difficult because they forced me to examine my tendencies, the sessions were beneficial in unexpected ways. 2 weeks later, Oliver texted that he'd found an apartment across town and was ready to relocate. We exchanged keys and separated everything. We mingled at my house. He appeared lighter to me, like he was finally confronting reality instead of running from it. He informed me he was seeing a therapist to get through his abandonment issues and relationship inattention. Moving his things into his car required many trips up and down the stairs. He returned the extra key I gave him years earlier after I gave him his apartment key. We lingered in the parking lot, unsure how to say farewell. After thanking me for everything, he got in his car. I watched him drive away and walked upstairs to my own flat. After a month, I was used to living alone, having the bed to myself and not having to arrange my schedule around anyone else. One afternoon, while browsing social media, I received a message request from Rachel Turner. I accepted it and saw Sophie's younger sister, whom I'd only seen a few times in college. Her reply thanked me for being polite to Sophie in their last discussion before she left town. Sophie was doing well in her new place, building a life for herself, Rachel wrote. Sophie occasionally mentioned how I handled everything with more grace than she deserved. Rachel quickly emailed to ask if I wanted to get lunch after I said I was pleased Sophie was okay. We arranged to meet the next weekend. When we met at a casual cafe near my flat, Rachel looked strikingly like Sophie, which surprised me. After we ordered lunch, she told me more about Sophie's mom's sickness. Sophie said their family fell apart as their dad emotionally shut down and Sophie carried everything. Rachel stated she was too young to help and had felt guilty about it ever since, seeing her sister die for their mom. She described how their dad denied aid and insisted he could manage it when he couldn't. Rachel lowered her voice when she mentioned visiting the house and witnessing how horrible things had gotten. How their mom no longer recognized anyone and their dad was barely coping. Hearing her changed my perspective on Sophie's decisions, recognizing her terrible predicament, but not dismissing her own agony. Rachel pondered what might have happened if their family had been more honest about needing help. If their dad hadn't insisted on keeping it quiet. Rachel hugged me goodbye after lunch, thanking me again for meeting her. I drove home, thinking about how difficult people's lives are, and how you never truly know what they're carrying. I spent the next week perfecting a large advertising pitch for a new client, staying up late most nights. Helen stopped by my doorway when I was studying slides in the conference room. After looking at me, she stated I seemed lighter. She entered and sat across from me after I inquired what she meant. She said I'd been standing taller and not hunching my shoulders to save room. I missed it, but she was correct. Somehow I had changed in recent weeks. Helen thought I'd quit carrying others' weight. Hearing her say that made me understand it had occurred. Oliver's grief, Sophie's shame, and my worry of not being enough. All of it was eventually taken down. Sitting in that meeting room, I felt liberated. How much energy I'd wasted on things I wasn't responsible for. 3 months after Oliver left, a deleted but recognizable number texted me. He wanted to meet for coffee to speak as friends, not to reunite. I pondered the message for a while, wondering if I was ready. Part of me wanted to dismiss it and go on. Part of me wanted closure, to see whether he'd changed or if this was simply another attempt to assuage his guilt. Texted yes. We met at a downtown coffee shop on Saturday morning. He was sitting at a corner table when I arrived, calmer and more content than I remembered. Not fidgeting or checking his phone every few seconds. After ordering beverages and sitting down, we had an awkward moment where neither of us knew how to start. His final message thanked me for meeting him and stated he'd been wanting to contact me for weeks, but wasn't sure whether I'd respond. Oliver started telling me about his therapy, how his counselor was forcing him to face why he was always terrified of being alone. He stated he realized he went from his broken engagement to supporting me, then from my support to dating me, without ever confronting his concerns. He confessed to exploiting relationships to avoid facing his fear of abandonment by focusing on others' needs. He looked me in the eyes and thanked me for forcing him to face his habits instead of enabling them like everyone else. I was astonished to hear Oliver take responsibility, since I expected him to make excuses or blame circumstances. In response to my question, he said he hadn't spoken to Sophie. He claimed he valued her decision to start again and was attempting to do the same. He told me he'd always have confused feelings for her and that you can't stop loving someone who meant so much to you, but he started to see that the connection wasn't healthy. His statements surprised me, since they showed a maturity I didn't anticipate. Oliver moved in his seat and apologized for not being my partner and for making me his emotional support instead of his equal. He stated he leaned on me when he was broken and remained leaning afterward. Not fair to any of us. He wished I'd meet someone who instinctively selects me first, since I deserved that. He spoke what I needed to hear months ago, and my throat tightened. I thanked him for the apology and hoped he'd find peace with himself before dating again, since the next person didn't deserve to be his crutch either. After a moment of quiet, he asked whether I recalled the weekend we traveled to the shore and were trapped in that storm. I grinned at how we were caught in this little hotel and played cards for hours as rain beat on the windows. I discovered that I didn't regret our relationship, even if it ended horribly. As we talked about other nice memories, Oliver taught me what I didn't want in a companion. Even if it hurt, being someone's second choice was valuable. I helped him confront his underlying trauma instead of avoiding it. It was all right for partnerships to serve a purpose, even if they didn't endure forever. 3 months after things broke apart, I went to my coworker's party and met Liam, her husband's coworker. After an hour of aimless chatter in the kitchen, he invited me to supper. I agreed even though I wasn't ready, and we planned for the next week. The evening was relaxed. Dinner at an Italian restaurant near my flat and easy chat. I was most surprised by how different it felt to be with someone who asked me questions and listened instead of just talking. Liam asked about my family, interests, and employment. He was fascinated when I told him about my sister and my art revival. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but it felt nice to recall other guys would want me instead of treating me like a consolation prize. The next weekend, Emily visited, and we spent Saturday morning reorganizing my apartment furnishings and hanging my paintings. She kept saying I was better living alone, and more like myself before dating Oliver. I asked her what she meant, and she said I'd been doing things I stopped doing with him, like going to evening concerts, staying up late reading, and taking strange art classes. She said I'd been bending myself to his wants without recognizing it. We ordered takeaway and ate pad thai from the containers on my couch. I was grateful to my sister for sticking with me through this turmoil. The next Tuesday, I almost hit Max in the fruit department while shopping for dinner. We laughed, and he inquired how I was doing, then spoke by the apples. Max informed me Oliver was doing well and seemed healthier than he had in years, since he was focused on design and therapy. I remember Max saying he was glad I was strong enough to walk away when Oliver couldn't make a decision, because it helped him to grow up and deal with his difficulties. He said losing me woke Oliver up from his life of avoiding harsh things. After saying goodbye, I moved my cart toward the checkout, thinking how bizarre it was that my suffering had changed someone else. At my therapy appointment that week, I discussed how I was beginning to accept the complicated truth that my ending, though painful, was the correct option. My therapist agreed and added, "That's emotional maturity, being able to hold both truths at once without trying to make it simpler than it is." She said, "Many people struggle with this, wanting to make their ex all nice or all horrible. Real life is more difficult. Oliver harmed me terribly, yet I saw he was traumatized. I might be sorry about leaving the relationship, yet know I deserved better. After that therapy office, I was proud of my progress after a few months. From the sobbing person at her door to someone who could see clearly and honestly. The next week, my supervisor summoned me into her office and said that I would be promoted to senior account manager with a huge raise and greater responsibilities. I left the meeting feeling like I could breathe for the first time in months. Helen saw me at my work later and demanded we celebrate that night. She ordered 2 costly glasses at this downtown wine bar. After studying me for months, she glanced at me across the table and stated I'd changed entirely. She said I was continually shrinking, quieting, and lowering my expectations when I started dating Oliver, but now I took up space without apology. She claimed I now spoke out in meetings when I inquired what she meant. I limited troublesome clientele. I stopped apologizing for others' mistakes. Helen lifted her glass and said she was proud of me for choosing myself when it would have been easy to settle. Sitting there, I realized she'd become more than a colleague who delivered harsh counsel. She was my mentor and friend who helped me recognize my value when I couldn't. For months after things went apart, I leased a smaller apartment across town. The house was mine with my name on the paperwork, which felt meaningful. Emily drove up that weekend to help me decorate and move in. On Saturday we painted one wall a deep blue I'd always liked, but Oliver claimed was too dark. Emily helped me display my late-night paintings in the living room. Instead of settling for a neutral couch, I chose one I loved at furniture stores. Emily kept saying the flat was different from the one I lived with Oliver, like it had my individuality instead of being generic. Since my table hadn't arrived, we ate pizza from the box on the floor. She said I looked lighter like when I started dating Oliver. I glanced around at my blue wall paintings and furnishings and realized this was the first place that was truly mine in years. I spotted Sophie's post on social media about creating a support group for Alzheimer's caregivers in her new location one evening while scrolling through my phone. She received hundreds of thanks and questions on the post. I pondered it, having strange sensations. I was still wounded by all that occurred, but I was glad she was helping others. I wrote her a quick note that I was delighted she was doing well and that her support group would benefit many families. She replied within an hour to thank me for my generosity after everything. Not saying anything else seemed like the proper ending for where we were. Oliver was across the room at a mutual friend's birthday celebration a few weeks later. First, my stomach leaped, but then I realized I wasn't terrified or furious, just indifferent. He stopped by and we spoke about our lives. He excitedly described a startup branding project he was working on. He learned about my promotion and new flat. He appeared thrilled for me, and I was shocked I liked his project. Though distant, we were cordial, which fit where we were at the time. The chat lasted about 5 minutes until we organically moved around the party, but it wasn't uncomfortable or forced, like a couple that split up. Liam and I had our second date at an Italian restaurant the following weekend. The chat moved beyond job and interests this time. I told him everything about Oliver and Sophie when he inquired about my former relationships, without making myself the victim or hero. I recounted what happened and what I learned. Liam recounted his difficult relationship with a cheating ex and how long it took him to trust again. I appreciated that we could be honest about our pasts without pretending we were perfect or over everything. He didn't modify my story or suggest changes. He listened, nodded, and said he understood my options. 5 months later, Emily inquired if I'd seen Oliver's recent social media posts during one of our weekly calls. I realized I hadn't checked his profile in weeks or months. I informed her, and she chuckled, saying that was a big development from the person who checked his accounts numerous times a day. She was right. I'd stopped caring what he was doing, with whom, or if he was happy. I concentrated on my life and progress for the first time in years. We chuckled at how far I'd come since the first night I arrived at her apartment, weeping and checking my phone. Helen grabbed me aside one afternoon at work and said she'd observed something. Faye, a younger co-worker going through a horrible breakup, was my lunch buddy. Helen said she overheard me telling Faye the same honest counsel she'd given me months before. about not settling for crumbs and valuing herself. I hadn't considered it, but she was correct. Sharing the insight that helped me see clearly while I was drowning in uncertainty was satisfying. It felt good to assist someone avoid my blunders by sharing my sad experience. Liam took me to a great taco place on our third date. After that, we strolled around the area, looking at old houses. He kissed me goodnight as he guided me to my car. I didn't compare it to kissing Oliver or doubt my readiness or decision. At that time, someone seemed genuinely interested in knowing me. We planned to hike the next weekend, and I was thrilled to get to know him more rather than nervous. 6 months after debating whether to allow Oliver back in, I was calling Emily about holiday preparations for my own apartment. She directly asked me whether I was happy, and I contemplated it. Yes, I said, but not in a fairy tale sense. It's a calm, grounded happiness. I realized it would have been easy to pick him. But that decision, that choice to pick myself, brought me to my real life. Rachel's handwritten note arrived on Tuesday in a pale blue envelope. She wrote that Sophie wanted me to know her support group had benefited scores of Alzheimer's families, and she'd found meaning in her new life. In her bottom message, Rachel thanked me for being polite to her sister when I had every reason not to. I read it twice and magnetized it on my fridge. It reminded me that people are complicated and messy, and sometimes they hurt you without trying to. But grace is always worth providing, even when it's hard. I received a text from an unknown number while putting lights in my apartment around the holidays. Before seeing the message, I almost erased it. Oliver. Requesting contact. He informed me of his well-being. Single for 6 months, focused on myself. I appreciate our time together. After staring at it, I typed that I was glad he was finding peace. Additional emails were exchanged. Simple, courteous life updates. The talk naturally ended, and we went our own ways. After hanging the lights, I felt peaceful. No anger. No grief. Simply acceptance that we were each going our own ways. After 2 months with Liam, I noticed how different everything seemed. He always texted me in the morning. He planned a week ahead. He called when he said he would. I commented in therapy how unusual it felt to be with someone so constant. My therapist grinned. She noted that I was now experiencing being someone's first choice, not their backup or comfort zone. Her remarks hit me hard because she was right. I always felt like I was battling with a ghost to be chosen by Oliver. I had nothing to prove with Liam. No questions, no worries. He simply showed up. While eating at an Italian restaurant, Liam asked me what I wanted in a relationship. The question surprised me because most guys don't ask that. I thought about it and set my fork down before replying honestly. I told him I needed someone who selects me without hesitation, shows up regularly, has work to be emotionally open, and doesn't make me worry whether I'm enough. Liam grinned and stated he shared my desire to build something great together. I grinned, cautiously sure we were 0.7 months after everything changed. I was enjoying coffee in my apartment on a Saturday morning, admiring my new surroundings. My advancement at work had increased my compensation and responsibilities. Bi-weekly therapy kept me grounded. My bond with Helen, who became a mentor, and Rachel, who I had lunch with to chat about her sister-in-life, grew stronger. Liam, my boyfriend, treated me the way I deserved but never understood. Oliver taught me relationship pitfalls. I learned to choose myself, even when it was hard and terrifying, by leaving him. Life wasn't perfect, and I still had lonely, uneasy days. But this apartment, these choices, this feeling, this was mine. All mine.